So on our final clip here, I want to ask you about your science and social studies block and what that looks like. So where does science and social studies in first grade at this school fit into literacy instruction in the Common Core?
I do have a separate social studies and science block. That way I can really give my kids the hands-on experience to build that background of the content and give them more information so then they can apply it in our literacy block when we're using it to write about information.
Okay, so they're learning about information and building background and getting context so that when you hit that literacy piece for the shared reading and writing with Benjamin Franklin or things like that, they're able to apply what they've learned.
Right. And it also helps them maybe give better explanations
Right.
for things. Like in our Benjamin Franklin writing over here, with Benjamin Franklin making the printing press process easier, we did a hands-on activity to show how long that process took so they understood why it was so important
Show
that he
me.
made it a little bit more efficient.
Let's show me what that looks
All
like.
right, so they had to lay out each letter individually. So we took letter stamps.
Okay.
And
like
the students,
these.
yes. And you're
And
just going to do your name,
I'm
but
just going to do my name.
our students actually wrote a sentence. They stamped a sentence.
So back in the old days, Benjamin Franklin's days, they had to stamp letter by letter in order to write something.
They had to plan it out, lay those stamps out individually, wait for it to dry.
They had to make sure they had
Oh
their
my goodness, and see your
the
letter
B
is
backwards.
upside down, so we're going to have to correct it. It's just very inefficient. It takes a whole lot of time. And
I'm not even done with the first part
you're-
of my name.
we've got 4 letters down.
And
And
if I wanted to write a whole novel,
exactly. They were using this printing press to print their newspapers and their books. So the students got a concrete example
Right.
of how long the process took. So then, when we were doing our graphic organizer and the students pulled out the fact that Benjamin Franklin came up with an easier way to print and then shared that new way with other printers, they were able to stop and explain and understand why that was
Right.
important.
so when they're reading about the big book and they get to the part where it talks about the printing press over here.
Hands back
Sorry.
this
It's
way.
it's such a big book.
There it is.
Steps for printing. They now have they have a frame of reference, a background that they can connect to.
Right.
So their explanations are more informed because they understand it better.
Yes.
So really, in social studies and science, you're building that base of content. What else might that look like in your classroom in terms of ways that you make them evidence that you have? So if they're not doing as much writing, because that takes a lot of time. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you evaluate whether they get the concepts you're trying to teach in science and social studies?
This is a shorter block, and so sometimes we'll bring in writing, but not always. A lot of times the assessment piece looks more like a quick little project, maybe art. We did a then and now. Part of our social studies standards are to compare and contrast the past and the present with each of the historical figures.
Right.
And so instead of writing about it, we took entertainment, communication, transportation, and the students just split it and did a then and a now, drew an illustration and labeled it
And
to
labeled
show quickly their understanding of how life was different then and now.
And that's a thinking skill. They're not just coloring a picture of Benjamin Franklin.
Right.
They have to think about how was it then and how is it now and how are they similar and how are they different. But they're using labels about them. They probably there's some conversation about it as well.
Yes. So that's really the time during the day where we're hitting the social studies standards.
Right.
But then we're using that content for our writing standards.
Is it always
earlier in the
connected?
day. Not always. We do try to do it as often as we can just to keep that connection going, but we can't always make that happen.
Not always. It's okay. So I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us come to you,
Well,
to
thank
your beautiful school here at Settles Bridge Elementary. And you have clearly a dynamic and exciting and vibrant classroom. And there's a lot of exciting things going on. So we look forward to coming back and talking to you again.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.